Pause right now. What you're about to see can't be unseen. 27 students boarded a bus, but none came home. 22 years later, we found their final resting place, and what was inside will give you nightmares. Warning, this video will change you. In 1999, an entire high school class disappeared without a trace. 2 decades later, the forest gave up its terrible secret, but the truth is worse than anyone imagined. The wilderness keeps its secrets buried deep, but sometimes the earth itself betrays them. When local hiker Marcus Chin pushed through the dense undergrowth of Oregon's ancient forests, he expected to find nothing more than fallen logs and forgotten trails. Instead, his flashlight beam fell upon twisted metal and shattered glass, the rusted carcass of a school bus that had no business being there. Moss crept through broken windows like grasping fingers, and inside, scattered across moldy seats, lay the remnants of 27 young lives that vanished without explanation 22 years ago. May 15, 1999. Forest Grove High School buzzed with the electric energy of impending freedom. Senior year was ending, college acceptance letters had arrived, and the future stretched endlessly ahead. The class of '99 had planned their final adventure together, a weekend camping trip to celebrate their graduation. They boarded bus number 57 with sleeping bags, guitar cases, and disposable cameras, their laughter echoing through the parking lot. Parents waved goodbye, teachers counted heads, and nobody suspected they were witnessing the last moments these kids would ever be seen alive. Nobody imagined they were watching ghosts in the making. The route to Rogue River-Siskiyou National Forest was supposed to be simple. A 2-hour drive along well-traveled highways, then a final stretch down a maintained Forest Service road to the designated campsite. Bus driver Harold Morrison had made this trip dozens of times with school groups. He knew every turn, every landmark, every mile marker. The bus was equipped with a CB radio, emergency supplies, and a detailed itinerary that parents had reviewed and approved. Everything was planned, everything was safe, everything was normal. Until 6:41 p.m., when the wheels of bus number 57 left the known world forever. Sharon Martinez was preparing dinner when her phone rang. Her son Danny's voice crackled through static. "Hey Mom, we made it to..." Muffled voices, laughter. "The place is so cool. You should see." Sound cuts out, replaced by an eerie humming. "Don't worry about us, we're..." Line goes dead. She played that message hundreds of times over the years, analyzing every breath, every background sound. Audio experts would later determine the call originated from a location with no cell towers for 50 miles. The timestamp showed 6:41 p.m., but according to their itinerary, they shouldn't have arrived until 8:30. Between 4:15 p.m. when bus number 57 left Forest Grove High School and 6:41 p.m. when that impossible voicemail was received, 27 teenagers and 2 adults simply vanished from existence. No traffic cameras captured their passage beyond mile marker 47 on Highway 18. No gas station attendants remembered seeing them. No other drivers reported the distinctive yellow school bus on the road. For 2 hours and 26 minutes, bus number 57 existed in a void traveling through space and time that left no trace, no witness, no evidence of their journey toward whatever fate awaited them in the darkness. By midnight. When the bus failed to check in at the ranger station, the first search teams were already mobilizing. Sheriff's deputies, park rangers, and volunteer firefighters combed every inch of the planned route with flashlights and flares. Helicopters with thermal imaging swept the forest canopy while search dogs followed phantom scents that led nowhere. Parents arrived in waves, clutching photographs and demanding answers that nobody could provide. The forest seemed to swallow their calls and prayers, returning only silence and shadows. By dawn, they had covered 300 square miles and found absolutely nothing. 3 days into the search, a local fisherman found something that would haunt investigators for decades, a water-damaged disposable camera wedged between riverside rocks, its yellow plastic body bearing the Forest Grove High School logo. The camera belonged to senior Emily Tran, known for documenting everything with her photography hobby. But when the film was developed, every single frame was blank, not damaged or water-ruined, but deliberately exposed to light as if someone had methodically destroyed each image. The question that tormented everyone: who found Emily's camera before it reached the water, and what did those missing photographs reveal? 6 weeks after the disappearance, Danny Martinez's mother found an envelope slipped under her door. No postmark, no return address, just her name written in block letters. Inside a single sheet of paper, we made it safely to our destination. Please stop looking for us. We are happy here. Love, Danny. Handwriting experts were baffled. It matched Danny's penmanship in many ways, but subtle differences suggested either forgery or something far more disturbing. The paper was common, the ink unremarkable, but forensic analysis revealed traces of forest soil embedded in the fibers. Someone had written this message in the woods with dirty hands, trying desperately to mimic a dead boy's handwriting. One by one, other families received similar notes over the following months. Each message was the same, reassurances written in their children's handwriting that grew less convincing with every delivery. Lisa Chen's note had her signature backwards. Marcus Thompson's used words he'd never spoken in his life. Sarah Williams's included references to places she'd never been. The notes weren't just cruel hoaxes, they were windows into something systematically evil, someone who had studied these kids, learned their handwriting, and was now taunting their grieving families with messages from beyond the grave. But who would do such a thing, and why? As months turned to years, theories multiplied like cancer cells. Some believed the kids had joined a cult, seduced by promises of enlightenment and eternal life. Others whispered about government experiments, alien abductions, or dimensional portals hidden in the ancient forest. The most disturbing theory came from a retired FBI profiler who suggested they were dealing with an organized group that had been hunting young people for decades. Predators who had perfected the art of making entire groups disappear without a trace. But theories were just theories, and the class of '99 remained stubbornly, terrifyingly gone. Time has a way of burying secrets, but it also has a way of unearthing them. For 22 years, Bus number 57 existed only in missing person files and parents' nightmares. The case grew cold, investigators retired, and the world moved on. But the forest remembered. On June 3, 2021, hiking enthusiast Marcus Chun was exploring an unmarked trail deep in the Cascade Range when he noticed something that shouldn't exist: geometric shapes hidden beneath decades of moss and undergrowth. He brushed away the green shroud and stumbled backward, his mind struggling to process what lay before him. A school bus, impossible and undeniable, sitting where no vehicle could possibly reach. Bus number 57 sat in a clearing 47 miles from the nearest road, surrounded by old-growth Douglas firs that would have taken centuries to reach their current size. There were no tire tracks leading to this place, no broken branches to suggest passage, no earthworks that might explain how several tons of metal had arrived in this remote location. The bus simply existed here as if it had materialized from thin air or been carefully placed by something with capabilities beyond human understanding. Forensic investigators would later confirm the impossible. This bus had been in this exact spot for at least 20 years, untouched by vandals or scavengers. The bus doors hung open like a gaping wound, and inside, time had stopped in 1999. Backpacks still hung from seatbacks, their contents mummified by the dry forest air. Textbooks lay open to pages about millennium celebrations and Y2K preparations. A Walkman sat on the dashboard, its batteries long dead but its last cassette still loaded. Now that's what I call music. 3. Everything was exactly as it should be from that final trip, except for the 17 sets of human remains scattered throughout the interior like pieces of a puzzle that nobody wanted to solve. The bus had become a monument to interrupted lives and unanswered prayers. The forensic team's initial assessment revealed something that chilled even seasoned investigators to the bone. The remains weren't randomly scattered by time and decay, they had been deliberately arranged. 17 bodies positioned with ritualistic precision. Some seated upright in specific bus seats, others laid out in geometric patterns along the aisle, all facing toward the back of the bus where an empty seat seemed to preside over this macabre congregation. Whoever had done this possessed not only intimate knowledge of death, but a twisted sense of ceremony that suggested these weren't random murders, they were sacrifices in some unimaginable ritual, hidden beneath the driver's seat. Investigators found what would become the most terrifying piece of evidence in the entire case: Emily Tran's art sketchbook, somehow preserved despite decades of moisture and decay. The early pages showed typical teenage drawings, portraits of friends, doodles during boring classes, sketches of graduation plans. But as the pages progressed, the artwork transformed into something nightmarish. Faceless figures in robes surrounded campfires. Trees bled symbols in ancient scripts. And on the final page, drawn with desperate, shaking hands, bus number 57 surrounded by tall, shadowy silhouettes while tiny figures inside pressed against windows in silent screams for help. 17 bodies accounted for, but 29 people had boarded bus number 57 that spring day in 1999. 2 teachers and 9 students remained unaccounted for, their fate even more mysterious than those found in the bus. Had they escaped? Were they taken somewhere else? Or had they met an even worse destiny in the depths of the forest? The missing included some of the most popular students, class president, star quarterback, homecoming queen, as if someone had carefully selected which lives to preserve and which to destroy. But preserved for what purpose? And where were the other 10 souls from the class of '99? Dr. Rebecca Torres had performed thousands of autopsies in her career, but the remains from bus number 57 presented challenges that defied medical explanation. The bones showed signs of malnutrition and prolonged captivity, suggesting these kids had lived for months or even years after their disappearance. But more disturbing were the modification marks, deliberate cuts and scratches that formed patterns across multiple skeletons, as if someone had been using living human beings as canvases for some twisted artistic expression. The forensic evidence painted a picture of systematic torture that had continued long after the world had given up searching for these missing children. The symbols carved into both the bus seats and several sets of remains belonged to no known writing system or religious tradition. Dr. Sarah Mackenzie, a specialist in ancient languages and occult symbols, spent months analyzing the markings before reaching a chilling conclusion. These weren't random scratches or primitive artwork, but a sophisticated symbolic system that someone had created specifically for whatever rituals had taken place in and around bus number 57. The symbols appeared to tell a story, one of selection, preparation, and transformation. But transformation into what? And who possessed the knowledge to create such an elaborate symbolic language? Shocking, disorienting. June 10, 2021, exactly 1 week after the discovery of bus number 57, the impossible happened. Jared Fields, age 39, walked into the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office looking like a man who had aged 30 years in 22. His hair was prematurely white, his eyes held the hollow stare of someone who had seen too much, and his body bore scars that told stories nobody wanted to hear. "I'm from the class of '99, he whispered to the desk sergeant. "I was on the bus. I've been hiding for 15 years, but now that you found them, I can't stay silent anymore." The dead, it seemed, sometimes came back to testify. In a recorded interview that would become one of the most disturbing documents in criminal justice history, Jared Fields recounted the nightmare that began on May 15, 1999. "The bus broke down around sunset," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We thought we were lucky when those people found us. They wore simple clothes, spoke softly, called themselves the Keepers of the Green. They said they'd help us, take us somewhere safe while we waited for repairs. We followed them into the forest like lambs to slaughter. By the time we realized we weren't being rescued, it was far too late to run." According to Jared's testimony, the Keepers of the Green were a religious cult that had operated in the Pacific Northwest for over a century, moving from location to location, always staying ahead of law enforcement and suspicious communities. They believed that young people possessed a spiritual energy that could be harvested through ritual and sacrifice, energy that would grant their elderly leaders extended life and supernatural power. "They were farmers," Jared explained, his hands shaking as he spoke. "But instead of crops, they cultivated human souls. They'd been watching our class for months, studying us, choosing which ones would serve their purposes best. The Keepers had developed a systematic approach to processing their young captives. Some were deemed suitable for reconditioning, psychological torture designed to break their will and remake them as devoted followers. Others showed too much resistance and were selected for sacrifice in rituals that Jared could barely describe without breaking down completely. They had charts, he recalled, tears streaming down weathered cheeks. Categories for each of us. The strong-willed went to the altar first. The compliant ones lived longer, but what we became, it wasn't living anymore. We were hollow shells programmed to serve their twisted faith. For 7 years, Jared lived in a nightmare that defied human comprehension. The Keepers maintained multiple compounds throughout the Cascade Mountains, moving their captives regularly to avoid detection. Days blended into nights in underground chambers where sunlight never penetrated and time lost all meaning. "They fed us just enough to keep us alive," Jared remembered. "They gave us just enough hope to prevent suicide. They taught us their prayers, their rituals, their twisted interpretation of nature worship. Some of my classmates forgot who they used to be. Others went insane. I pretended to convert while planning my escape for 2,555 days. On a snowy February night in 2006, Jared Fields did what no captive of the Keepers had ever accomplished. He escaped. Using knowledge gained from 7 years of careful observation, he slipped away during a ritual ceremony when the cult's attention was focused elsewhere. I ran for 3 days straight, he testified. I ate snow and bark and anything I could find. I knew they were following me, tracking me like a wild animal. But I also knew the forest better than they thought. I found roads, found people, found my way back to a world that had forgotten I ever existed. But freedom came with a terrible price. Jared couldn't return to his old life because the Keepers had made it clear that escapees would be hunted forever. He lived under assumed names, moving constantly, always looking over his shoulder for signs of pursuit. They have people everywhere, he insisted during his testimony. Not just cultists, but sympathizers who've been recruited over the decades. They watch for anyone who might be from their missing groups. They monitor police reports, news stories, social media mentions. I survived 15 years in hiding by becoming invisible, by erasing Jared Fields completely and becoming someone else. When investigators asked about the other missing students and teachers, Jared's composure finally cracked completely. Through racking sobs, he explained that some had died during the early years of captivity, killed in rituals or succumbing to injuries and illness. Others had been promoted within the cult hierarchy, their minds so thoroughly broken and rebuilt that they became willing participants in recruiting new victims. Sarah Williams, she helped them plan new abductions by the end. Marcus Thompson, he performed the sacrificial ceremonies himself. They weren't my friends anymore. They were something else, something that wore familiar faces but had empty souls. In 2022, Jared published a memoir titled Chosen, My 7 Years with the Keepers of the Green. The book became an instant bestseller, but its success came at a tremendous personal cost. Death threats arrived daily, conspiracy theorists accused him of fabricating everything for fame and money, and worst of all, strange sightings were reported of people matching the descriptions of other class of 99 survivors. Publishing that book was either the bravest thing I ever did or the stupidest, Jared admitted in his final interview. But those families deserve to know what happened to their children, even if the truth was worse than any lie. 3 months after his memoir's publication, Jared Fields disappeared again. His apartment was found undisturbed, his car still in the parking garage, his daily routine abandoned midstream. But this time he left behind evidence of his fate, security camera footage showing 3 figures in dark clothing escorting him calmly from his building. No struggle, no apparent distress, as if he had been expecting them. The Keepers, it seemed, had finally reclaimed their escaped property. Or perhaps Jared had returned willingly to spare other potential victims from the cult's vengeance. 6 months after Jared's second disappearance, his landlord found something hidden in the wall of his apartment during renovation work. Wrapped in plastic and tucked behind loose drywall was a handwritten note. If you're reading this, they found me. The Keepers are still out there. They're still watching. They're still collecting. The class of '99 was just one harvest among many. Check the missing persons reports from 1987, 1994, 2005, 2012. Always groups of young people. Always near national forests. Always during spring when the green power is strongest. Stop them before they choose the next class. Stop them before they finish what they started with us. Today, the case of the class of '99 remains officially unsolved, though several federal task forces continue investigating the cult known as the Keepers of the Green. Bus number 57 sits in an FBI evidence warehouse, its secrets slowly revealing themselves to forensic experts who work in shifts because prolonged exposure to the vehicle causes nightmares and psychological distress. Emily Tran's sketchbook has been digitized and distributed to law enforcement agencies worldwide, its symbols now part of a database designed to identify cult activity. And somewhere in the vast wilderness of the American Northwest, the Keepers continue their ancient work, patient as the mountains, persistent as the rain, choosing the next group of young souls to feed their insatiable hunger for power over life and death. The question isn't whether they'll strike again, it's when and where and how many will vanish before someone finally stops them. Some mysteries are solved. Others simply wait for their next chapter to begin.